Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to this very exciting session of the Innovate for Cities conference, which has just started yesterday. We are here together for a session that will focus on promoting partnerships and participation in climate action, planning, and implementation. So this will be a very particular session since our presenters are not able to attend live. But luckily, technology is on our side and a great support as the presenters were able to pre-record their sessions. As such, I suggest that we proceed as follows. We will first hear a presentation from the local government of the city of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Mrs. Florencia Romano, who is the Undersecretary of Open Government and Accountability, will explain how Buenos Aires city government proceeded to build its climate action plan in a very participatory manner. After this presentation, we'll hear Valentina Cattivelli from the IULM University in Milano, Italy, who will present climate adaptation strategies and the associated governance structures in mountain areas. And she will particularly focus on the Alpine area. Since our presenters are not able to join the session today, we will conclude the session just after the last presentation. If you would like to share any questions with the presenters, I suggest that you share them in the chat, indicating the presenters to whom this question is, as well as your email address. And then I will be very happy to transfer them your questions. So let's start first with the presentation from Florencia Romano from the local government of the city of Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Florencia Romano. I have been working at the Buenos Aires city's government as Undersecretary for Open Government and Accountability since 2019. It is an honor for me and my team to represent our city by participating in the Innovate for Cities global and online event among other cities who are working to achieve the same goal: take on, accelerate, and more ambitious climate actions. Open government has adopted as part of the Buenos Aires city's government backbone years ago, and its values began to apply for climate change policies as well. It stands for access to public information, accountability, and collaborative work between governments and citizens. Adopting this model is an opportunity that implies opening the public institutions' doors, welcoming key stakeholders, academia experts, representatives of civic organizations, and each and every individual from our society so they can add value. We are convinced that only by working together with other actors we will reach the goals that our city committed to it in its 2050 Climate Action Plan: to reduce carbon neutral emissions significantly in order to be a carbon resilient city. As of 2016, the city of Buenos Aires partnered with the SDGs 2030 agenda and adhered to the Paris Climate Agreement. A year later, Buenos Aires became one of the first 25 cities in the world to commit to the carbon neutrality by 2050, thus reinforcing where we stand on climate change. The Open Government team began to elaborate and pitch ideas in order to uphold the values that we pledged to represent, such as collective intelligence, innovation, participation, and accountability, and our commitment with these international organizations and partners. We hope that our efforts to tackle climate change here in Buenos Aires, as well as our sustainable actions, will spark other local governments and cities to do the same. It all led to a co-creation of a public website in 2020, meant to promote transparency, collective intelligence, and awareness regarding this issue that affects directly local and global agendas, and that soon the consequences will become more radical and irreversible if we do not respond to it with steadfast, long-term policies as shown by the IPCC's report released this August. To build and launch this platform, we work as a team with 20 different civic society organizations, 15 experts, and more than 600 citizens. Its development was divided into 3 stages. The first one consisted on an exploratory phase where in-depth interviews with experts and CSOs were conducted. The aim was to include and actively listen to an array of different voices with experience on the topic and answering the same question to cover as much ground as possible. What information would you like to be able to find on the website? Which environmental indicators should be integrated on the platform? How can we promote within our society as a change in our daily habits? Among other questions. This methodology was effective and provided many different viewpoints and actions to take on as a public administration. Hence, this stage gave way to creation of several environmental indicators like water quality, energy consumption, air quality, city's temperature, historical data, waste generation, transparency in the management of the agenda within the government. It was also advised to include several others: rainfall, climate projections, trees, and energy sources. In addition, they recommended organizing and communicating the information in a simple, interactive, and clear way, so that every citizen can interpret the data easily and have access to relevant public information on this matter. Maps, visualization, and storytelling tools are now being implemented every time we communicate news. Initiatives and accomplishments regarding our progress on the Climate Action Plan 2030 to 2050 to become a resilient, inclusive, and carbon-neutral city. Regarding the second stage, sectorial work roundtables were held to co-create a citizen activation program with neighbors, experts, and members of different environmental CSOs. The aim of this phase was to know which sustainable habits they apply to everyday life activities and the obstacles that they might have had in doing so, and also to obtain ideas on how the government can raise awareness on this topic within society and motivate them to practice more sustainable actions that will hopefully become habits in the short term. Other events, such as collective intelligence tables and hackathon for the collective climate action, were held to brainstorm more ideas on citizens' activation initiatives. The hackathon's aim was to co-design the digital layout of the platform, keeping in mind the importance of the user's experience. 8 sensors to measure air quality during the different stages of isolation due to COVID-19 were given to our government to compare values. The sensors were carried by volunteers around the city by bicycle or by foot, and the data that was gathered was published on BA Data's website, where any citizen has public access to those records. Also, when this project came to an end, more than 30 datasets were created as part of the Open Government Framework. These are continuously updated and are available on the BA Climate Change website for citizens and actors interested in the subject to monitor, learn from, and reuse them in any way they see fit. Moreover, as part of our openness policy, the building process of the BA Climate Change platform has been documented to share it with any stakeholder who is interested in the co-creation, and a part of the website can be replicated thanks to its open code format. This allows the private sector or governments to adapt the code easily to their needs and context, and they can improve it by adding other functionalities or locating any existing problems that can be fixed and optimized, thus reinforcing collective intelligence and cooperation. As a whole, the entire process still represents a huge highlight for us because we managed to obtain a final product as a result of all the work done during that co-creation period with other members of our community that do not belong to the city's public administration, but possess truly valuable knowledge and experience. And this is the key to produce tools that definitely will have a profound and positive impact for society. I see this experience as a building block of a deep transformation within society. It is true that participation is growing slowly. Not every citizen will advocate for the climate change agenda, but we still aim to motivate as many citizens and key stakeholders as we can as public institutions. We cannot compel people to get interested in the matter. However, we can share the city's public records, policies on climate change and their progress, to show why we care and why it's imperative that others do so as well. Our efforts will continue to ensure the path to resilience and carbon neutrality.
Yeah, so many thanks to Florencia Romano. So as a reminder, she is the Undersecretary of Open Government and Accountability in the local government of the city of Buenos Aires in Argentina. So we thank her very much for sharing her presentation, and for allowing us to travel a bit in Argentina. For those who joined us lately, please note that the presenters of this session are not here, unfortunately, but they have recorded their sessions. In case you would like to ask any question, please share them in the chat. Indicate, please, the presenter to whom you would like to address it, as well as your email address, and then I will be more than happy to share it with them. We now have a second presentation. It's a presentation from Valentina Cattivelli. Valentina is a researcher and project manager at IULM University in Milano, in Italy. Her presentation will deep dive into the climate adaptation strategies and the associated governance structures in mountain areas, especially in the Alpine region in Europe. So now please, let's start the video of the second presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Valentina da Cattivelli. I'm a researcher at Ulm University in Milan, and also I'm an ESPON Research Fellow at the European Commission. I'm very glad to be here today to describe you the first preliminary results of my research concerning the climate adaptation strategies and the associated governance structures in mountain areas. I concentrate my attention, and I hope also yours, on the case of the Alpine regions. Why I concentrate my attention on the Alps? essentially because the Alpine region is a territory in the heart of Europe. Traditionally, its mountains play an important role in influencing and the direction and consistency of wind, precipitation, and temperature. Topography is articulated and climate conditions change at very short distances. Differences in altitude impact differently on climate conditions. The presence of glaciers and permafrost trigger slope instability with increasing risks of rock falls, mud, and debris flow. Changes in atmospheric wind flow patterns induce large and varying precipitation. Over the last decades, this role is under pressure as climate change transforms this area in a place of high risk environments. These changes in turn influence the richness of natural resources, the diversity of the fauna, and also the opportunity to exploit them for economic reasons, specifically for touristic and agricultural reasons. This territory presents a climatic variability that encompasses colder areas at higher altitude and warmer ones located especially in the valleys. The alpine areas represents now a fragile ecosystem due to the current climate changes. Temperature will increase significantly in the period 2021 and 2015. This map highlights the projection of temperatures for the period 2020-2050 in Europe. The whole alpine area is bright red, and this means that in the next years the temperature will increase of more than 2 degrees. As you can see also in this other important and significant map, precipitation is unevenly distributed with an increasing trend since 1971. In the eastern part of the Alps and a decreasing one in the western part. Specifically in the northernmost areas in Austria, Germany, and Slovenia, but also in Switzerland, the average daily amount of precipitation and specifically the average daily amount of precipitation in the considered period is increased. On the contrary, in France, Italy, this average daily amount is decreased. Future scenarios reveal that summers will be drier, whereas winters with more precipitation will be more likely. Extreme weather events such as heavy rainfalls and droughts, as well as more days and nights with extreme temperatures, can be expected. These climate changes have specifically impacts, but it is also necessary to consider other climate factors and the relative changes and impacts. I would like to focus on the importance of the presence of glaciers because at the moment their decline is increasing. We also know that a reduction of snow coverage at lower altitude is a very significant problem. Probably snowfalls occur later in winter and a shorter snow coverage period is expected. We need also to considering the importance of avalanches as considerable impacts on the territories of the Alpine region. Specifically, less avalanches at lower and middle heights are predicted for the future due to less snowfall. We also need to consider the shift from dry to wet avalanches at higher altitude. With reference to runoff, we know that we will have less runoff in summer and more runoff in winter. We will have also an increase of natural hazards and higher flow rates. Natural hazards are also a considerable problem. In fact, we go along with climate change. They go along with climate change, but are difficult to predict. We know also that more fall processes will take place in the future due to the permafrost decline. Floods and mudslides will be more frequent, and this led to some extreme weather events such as heavy rain. All these climate changes have a significant impact on economic sectors. The most affected economic sectors will be the agriculture, the forestry, the water management, the tourism, the transport, the energy, and the biodiversity. Specifically, in agriculture, new cultivation forms will be possible due to the higher temperature and the longer vegetation period. Fruit cultivation and also viticulture will be possible in elevated locations. Varieties of artificial irrigation will be necessary due to the less availability of water. We will have also premature bloom and maturity, and maybe higher susceptibility to early and late frosts. There will be possible quality impairment at harvest. We will have also possible damage due to through and hail. Forestry will result more sensitive to higher elevations and pests due to the higher temperature and dryness. The fire risk will be higher. Regarding the water management, we will know that in the future, more irregular precipitation distribution and higher temperature during winter will cause more rain in winter and less snow melt in summer. Water supply in the future is and also a very significant problem. In the winter we will have up to 135% more. On the contrary, in summer we will have less than the current values, about 40% less specifically. We will have less water available, and this could lead in some conflicts with increased consumption. Intensive agriculture, tourism, and artificial snow hydropower will be in conflict for the use of the reduced quantity of water. Also, tourism could be affected by this crisis. Especially, we will know that in the future we will have less snow and more rain in winter, and this probably could have an impact on ski resorts and later opening of lifts. The guaranteed snow will diminish and more heat in urban agglomerations, there being led to the increased demand for higher situated destinations. Also, transport system could be more vulnerable to risks to the extreme events. Higher temperatures, lower costs in winter, and higher costs in summer for conservation will be a very problem will be a very significant problem. More summer traffic due to more summer tourists with traffic jams, noise and air pollution, and higher demand for space for parking place will be a very significant problem in the future. Problems concern also energy and biodiversity sectors. Specifically, we will have a strongest impact on higher position hydroelectric power plants and possible positive impacts on hydropower due to higher winter runoff. Habitat shifting upward, and we will have probably also the immigration of new species, and this could be problematic for the indigenous flora and fauna. Who governs the adaptation to these changes? The situation is dramatic, and also these images related to the loss and mass and thickness of one of the most important Lombardy glacier is evident. Impacts can be different even between similar administrative units, and their effects shape territories independently from the institutional borders set by law. These borders divide the Alpine area into 8 countries: Italy, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, France, Slovenia, Monaco, and Liechtenstein. 48 regions, autonomous provinces, and less than 6,000 municipalities. Each institution has specific competencies on climate changes policies and adopt different governance structures and mechanisms to govern the administrated territories. In addition to these national, regional, and local governments, the following bodies have some degree of authority and actively promote the interests of this area. One international institution, the Alpine Convention; one transitional strategy, the OSALP strategy; and also the European Funds Beneficiary Area, the Alpine Area for Alpine Space Programme Interreg. On a similar territory, three international organizations overlap partially. To address these impacts and also adapt local societies to them, governance of climate issues is expected to take effective and timely responses and to be tailored specifically to the specific communities and localities. Some challenging factors like multi-hectare interest, information scarcity, but also the lack of coordination, geographical specificities can reduce its effectiveness. Each region is differently administered according to national and regional laws. In force of these regulations, each of them adopts specific climate adaptation strategies for addressing just the challenges of the territories they govern, without considering the effects on the ones nearby. Thanks to the ongoing decentralization of the climate policies toward the lowest level of government, a growing number of non-governmental organizations and sub-national authorities have initiated to program and share public understanding on climate change and developed innovative policies at the lowest governmental territories. Despite the plurality of these involved bodies and institutions, limited focus is placed on the administrative level at which the respective relative decisions take place, or on the relationships between institutional and non-governmental actors. Scarce attention is also given to the governance mechanisms, including planning and programming systems instruments and their coherence with the existing and wider scale strategies adopted to address climatic vulnerabilities. Adaptation policies to these changes appear urgent and require some form of global collective action. Climate change is in fact depicted as a problem to be resolved at the international level, as it is characterized by uncertain settings in which some international multi-territorial dependencies exist and dynamically evolve, and also where different bodies and institutions perceive and assess them differently. Traditional approaches to this problem view multilateral agreements negotiated by the national government as the central mechanism of climate change governance. The Paris Conference is and better remains the core and a central forum for the global climate changes and their governance. However, in addition, many climate change policies currently can be observed at the most centralized level. In multilateral and also bilateral agreements, many states coordinate and mutually foster their climate policies. They also organize some transnational networks to commit to specific climate targets. Under the umbrella of these agreements and the network, national states also adopt unilateral national climate policies at national level. They also support some national initiatives. In recent times, other institutions operate in the same framework. We can consider the importance of financial institutions, NGOs, corporations, associations, groups of citizens. Their larger participation in the climate change issues restructures the international approaches to climate governance, which were focused mainly on the importance and the central role of nation states and also other institutions at national level. Considering the problems and the future impacts of climate change, we need a more appropriate arena for climate governance decisions. This implies the displacing of a traditional top-down approach with the importance of some national institutions and the scarce relevance of other bodies and organizations at the lowest territorial and administrative levels. Institutional driven climate change, for more polycentric bottom-up strategies, where the role of some national and also non-state national actors are essential. We need also for a more appropriate arena to develop and also implement more targeted policies with a specific attention for each territory. We need also to integrate this policy into a multi-focused process for achieving more sustainable development at local level. According to a recent study by Sapiens and other scholars in 2021, at global level, we can list different types of climate governance. Also, during this presentation, we list these 5 different types. The first type of climate governance is related to the multi-level governance, which is based on a decentralization as a decision making take place at a range of territorial levels or scales. In this context, or better, in this type of climate governance, it is evident that the emergent actors are so important, but unfortunately they don't cooperate at the same level of the government. The second type of climate governance is defined as a global governance, and at this level, the importance of the state is essential. Within the global governance, the state plays an essential role in defining the climate governance issues. The third types of climate governance is a transnational, polycentric, and adaptive governance approach. Within this approach, public-private agreements and national state intervention are so essential. The fourth type of climate governance is particularly because within it the local communities and the city networks play an essential role. In fact, we can consider within this type a sort of polycentric order and new instruments to consider transitional law. In fact, non-state and sub-state agency and actors play an essential role in this polycentric order and use new instruments to consider transnational law. The last type of climate governance is transformative and adopts an experimental approach, which is clearly defined with the expression of learning by doing. This approach is focalized at more local scales. Which one for the helps? Which climate governance type is currently adopted in this specifically territory? We conduced a very significant analysis, and specifically we consider in the present investigation the strategies formulated at European regions, at European level for the entire European regions. In the other terms, in this analysis, we adopt a method which consists in a document analysis of the most climate adaptation strategies recently formulated at European level. For this reason, we consider the three institutions at European level we mentioned before: the Alpine Convention, the EUSALP, and also the Alpine Area for Alpine Space Program. And we consider the documents they have adopted in the last 5 years. Specifically, we consider the declaration on climate change in 2006, the action plan on climate change in the Helps 3 years later, and also the sixth report on the state of Helps adopted in 2016, 1 year before the adoption of a multi-annual work plan. These documents were adopted by the Alpine Convention, while we consider other documents for the EUSALP, like the action groups, working documents, and also the CAPAM, the climate change adaptation platforms for the HELPS and the relative database. For the Alpine Area for Alpine Space Program Interreg, we consider the database of the finance projects in the last 5 years. The document analysis also consider the list of strategies plans formulated at national and regional level by the Alpine countries, regions, and autonomous provinces. Specifically in this table, I list all the documents I considered for Austria, Switzerland, and also Germany, France, and Italy. In this presentation, I illustrate some findings from some of these documents. The analysis of these documents is addressed to detail some essential characteristics of the governmental structure, which is currently adopted at the regional level for all Alpine regions. Specifically, when I read all these documents, I tried to give an answer and some descriptions of three key elements within the governmental structures. I consider, in fact, the governance structures and mechanisms. I also analyze the stakeholders' involvement and also the linkages with the existing and wider scale strategies. At the European level, we consider specifically the Alpine Convention. As you know, the Alpine Convention is an international treaty signed by Austria, France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Slovenia, Monaco, and the European Union in 1995. Its goals concern the sustainable development and the protection of the Alps, as well as to preserve this territory for future generations through transnational cooperation involving national, regional, and local authorities. Being a legally binding instrument, its decisions are included in specific protocols which are mandatory for the signatory states. As you know, in this map, the Alpine Convention is delineated by the green sign and cover large part of the Alpine area. Some regions in Austria, Switzerland, North Italy, and also France. The Alpine Convention adopted a declaration on climate change in 2006 and also the action plan on climate change in 2009, followed in many thematic working groups by a series of climate relevant activities, which led to the creation of a sort of Alpine guideline in the field of water management, natural hazards, and also adaptation at local level. The Alpine Convention also published other documents like the Vision of the Renewable Alps, the sixth report on the states of Alp, and also the multi-annual work plan. For the period between 2017 and 2022, this convention established an Alpine Climate Board to bundle together existing climate change initiatives and contribution in the Alpine area for a climate neutral Alpine space. The Alpine Convention is also recognized as an important convention because its board elaborated the Alpine climate target system for 2050. This is a long-term strategy with very significant projection for the future impacts of climate change. This board also elaborated the Climate Action Plan 2020 and also organized workshops and work on cross-sectoral aspects of adaptation on the production of guidelines, workshops, and experimentation projects. This aspect, the cross-sectoral analysis, is very relevant and is a key characteristic of the documents elaborated by the Alpine Convention, which I remember are mandatory as the Alpine Convention is an international institution. The Heus Alp in this map is demarcated by the blue line and covers largely the territory of the Alpine Convention and also the southern regions of Germany. The Heus Alp is a macro strategy at the European level and works for cross-border cooperation among the Alpine regions. Within the action groups, which are the informal groups of experts, policymakers who currently operate in some institution at regional level in the Alpine country, they coordinate national and policies decisions. Also, the EUSALP works on studies, and works for the good practice elaboration. In this, EUSALP has a monosectoral vision as similar to the Alpine Convention. It operates considering only one sector ONS in order to analyze the possible effects of climate change on a singular economic or social sector. The Alpine space is demarcated with the the red line in this map and covers partially the Alpine Convention and the EUSALP area. It is not a consolidated institution, but it is an European transnational cooperation program for the Alpine region. The aim of the Alpine space is to provide a framework to facilitate the cooperation among the Alpine regions. More in detail, at international level, decisions of both Alpine space and EUSALP are not mandatory. They do not dictate the governance structures or instruments with which to pursue the objectives recommended. This limits their efficacy. They prefer drafting plans, projections, guidelines, and they adopt some difficulties that are long term because their focus is related to 5, 10 years, and also they are monosectoral as they consider only the effects product by a single sector of activity. The procedure adoption of these documents is relatively simple and requires just an agreement among the participants on to the programs. Both institutions prefer adopting, in addition to the some informative documents, also the projects, because projects are a sort of preferred tools for their duration. In other time, these both institutions prefer promoting some projects in order to regulate in a certain way, and specifically not in a mandatory way, the climate changes. However, monitoring of the results of these projects still lacks. In these projects and also in documents drafts, the stakeholders' involvement is still limited to a few public conferences or working groups. At the lowest territorial level, as you know in these maps, in the Alps, there are located 8 countries, 48 regions, and less than 6,000 municipalities. In this area, in addition to the free international institutions or organizations, we have also all these institutions at governmental level. So we have an arena which is a very full crowd because we have so many actors. We consider just a few countries in the Alpine regions and the strategies they adopt to govern the adaptation strategy to climate change. Specifically, we analyze the case of Austria thanks to the above-mentioned document analysis. At the end of this analysis, we know that in Austria the responsibility for the coordination of climate policies lies with the Federal Ministry of Climate Protection, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation and Technology. These policies involve different competencies at the federal and regional level. Last 3 years, the Austrian federal government drew a comprehensive national energy and climate plan for achieving the Paris climate protection goals. This plan was very significant, but covers some sectors which are not subjected to the EU emissions trading system. These sectors were transport, agriculture, and buildings. This document includes also the regulation related to the tourism, energy, and transport sectors, and focuses its attention on ecosystem and biodiversity, also on special planning and trade and industry. In the run-up to the work abroad, the consultation was conducted. Nearly 300 measures were included, and also an impact assessment activity was carried out. So it was possible to identify some investment needs and to give some feedback to the European Commission on the elaboration of some adaptation strategies. In Austria, there is a great relevance also for the position and the activity of other institutions like the Austrian Energy Agency, Vienna and Graz University, and also the YIFO. In fact, impact assessment demonstrates the way to achieve this objective and also the importance of the operation of these actors in order to complete a more efficient impact assessment, which can be useful to develop new and more updated policies. This impact assessment consists of a comprehensive database analysis that outlines that the achievement of the objective can include effects on employment situation, GDP, and also income distribution. Participation is also relevant, and specifically regions, some Austrian regions participate in this project, and also in other pilot program, CLAR, which offers a process-oriented approach for municipalities to raise awareness for climate change adaptation and also implement concrete action at the regional level. This was one of the first experience of stakeholders' involvement in these practices. In their adaptation measures, the participating regions focus on bringing together the population and people from the affected fields of action, informing them of raising their awareness of adaptation to climate change. Wider and large strategies are taken into consideration as the objective of international treaties, European institutions, and other organizations operating transnationally at European level are included in all planning documents. Also, the Austrian Alpine regions contribute to harmonize the strategies and also work to a bottom-up and also a top-down approach, which were suggested as a solution within the different working groups within HUSALP and the Alpine Convention. Germany is another important case study, and this country is characterized by so ambitious climate targets. The country adopted some years ago the Climate Action Plan for 2050, and at the end of 2016, the national German government invited to tackle climate change with ambitious climate policies and also the strong implementation of policies in order to reach in short time the Paris Agreement objectives. The Climate Action Plan 2015, centers on the goal of achieving extensive greenhouse gas neutrality by 2050, of keeping global warming significantly below 2 degrees Celsius. The German government considers long-term strategies and and dialogue as a key instrument for future-oriented policies. It also promotes reliable policy planning and the revision of all elaborated strategies at the end of 2020 for an estimation of the economic, social, and ecological impacts of possible measures. This plan is a sort of guideline for all German areas and also for the activities of private actors. It focuses specifically on the restructure of the energy sector, but also it considers other economic sectors like transport, agriculture, and also their implications on climate change. In Germany, the programs of measures are fleshed out in cooperation with stakeholders in the climate action alliance and civil groups, and also in coordination with the German Bundestag. German government appoints scientific platforms, which include also scientific and natural science documents. Within this platform, scholars shares information, studies, and also discuss about climate ideas and also policies. The program plan will continue to be reviewed and updated in the future, also with the collaboration of other institutions like the lender, the local authorities, and also private sector. The participation process related to this plan and its update are under review regularity. Each year, this plan is in fact evaluated in order to analyze the progresses. None of the above documents contain specific requirements for the Alpine regions because all documents refer to the whole German territory. Italy also has a very significant case study because here the regions and the environment agencies represent the reference for the environmental protection and climate change action. They developed applied research activities, training, information, and education on climate change, and also carry out scientific coordination and incentivation activities related to climate change. The Italian alpine regions have adopted some regional strategies and plan to address local climate changes and reduce the negative impacts of them. The adaptation measures will be identified according to some priority criterion and the analysis of specific scientific evidence, expected scenarios, and also vulnerability analysis, which are integrated in the sector's plan. Appropriate adaptation measures are also adopted for some regional plans, and also the redaction of these documents involve some different stakeholders, but the methodology for their involvement has yet to be defined in detail for all regions. In 2015, the Italian government adopted the National Strategy for Adaptation to Climate Change. However, the National Plan for the Adaptation to Climate Change has a tragic, as a problematic approval process because this process is not still definitely concluded. All these documents have been thoroughly based on the involvement of stakeholders and decision makers on the principle of preferring mainstream adaptation across existing policies rather than introducing new ones. The documents also include some reference to ESALP and the European strategies. Their legal references include also European directives and regulations. The Alpine Convention guidelines for climate change adaptation at a local level provide a solid process overview of the main impacts and also advises local institutions on climate adaptation and introduces criteria for the analysis of the vulnerability and risk assessment. In conclusion, we can consider some findings which are very important to reorientate the action of all institutions that operate in the complex alpine area. In fact, as we mentioned before, the climate change governance in the Alpine area includes macro-regional European actors like EUSALP, Alpine Region, and Alpine Area for the Alpine Space Program Interreg. It also includes the national institution and also the regional provincial actors which differently cooperated, formulate and adopt their own climate adaptation strategies. At the European and the national level, the policies and the strategies we considered define specific aims and targets, but sometimes they refer to the whole alpine area without any consideration for the single alpine regions in detail. At international level, the decisions of the Alpine Space and the House Alp are not mandatory, and this limits their efficacy. So these documents they adopt are monosectoral and long term. They hardly consider the cross-sectoral effects on climate change, and the project is the preferred tool for their duration because their duration is limited and can be useful for governing climate change in better ways. The monitoring of these projects and their efficacy still lacks. This okay, sorry, okay. Other findings of these studies are those that are mentioned in this slides, and specifically the Alpine Convention acts as essential because include the data for future scenarios about the entire areas as policy guidelines, which are mandatory. And all three organizations, the Alpine Convention, the OSALP, and also the Interreg space, the Alpine space, are open to a multi-participatory approach. However, this approach is difficult to implement completely because this organization they do not specifically act with the pursuit of okay, sorry, I repeat this concept. Only recent, all these organizations are open to the discussion to other agencies and the private actor within a multi-participatory committee. The implementation choices are left to lower decision-making levels. However, the preferred tools remain the drafting of a plan and the projects. And at the national level, all Alpine countries adopt a general framework, sometimes with a specific act and together with the specific focus for some policies, specifically the energy policies. At a lower administrative level, provincial documents include also measures intending to reach the fixed targets at European and national level, or include some specific recommendations directly suggested by wider policies. The evolution of power to the lowest territorial level was implemented in all considered countries, referring to the kind of the types of governance defined by Sapiens and other scholars in 2021. It is possible to understand that different models are adopted in the European countries. The governance structure adopted specifically at Alpine area is specifically and refer to the multi-hectare sectors. It can be, in fact, assimilated to a multi-governance system where different players are included in a broader scheme. At the level of a single state, the majority of European countries could be included in the second cluster because they refer to a great importance of their institution. However, some elements suggest that there is an ongoing transformation towards the third and the fourth cluster, where the role of subnational and private organization is so relevant. Two countries, specifically Italy and Austria, promote examples of transformative and experimental approaches at the regional level. So, to conclude my long presentation, I think that it is important to underline that the preference mechanism for addressing the specific climate adaptation challenges in alpine region is the regulations included in monosectoral plans. These regulations are not related to the wider scale strategies and macro regional level, but refer just to the administrative territory. The participation of local institutions and citizens in defining this regulation is limited and not presented in all European regions, but just in the regions we consider as a case study, for example, Italy, Austria, and above all, Germany. Interactions across alpine, national, and subnational policy domains remain limited. So if you want to focus specifically on this topic and have more information about my presentation and also the results of my investigation, you can read my recent paper. Here there are all references. This paper is free for download. So I would like to thank you for your attention. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
Hi everyone, so many thanks for Valentina Cattivelli. As a reminder, Valentina is working at the IULM University in Milano, and her presentation was about climate adaptation strategies and the associated governance structures in mountain areas. For those who joined lately, this is just to inform you that all the presentations of these sessions were pre-recorded since the presenters were not able to join us live. So please feel free to use the chat if you want to share any question with them. I'm very happy to send them out. I have a look at the chat, but I can't find any question. Then maybe I suggest that we close here this session. Thank you very much to all of you for attending, and many thanks for participating and attending to this Innovate for Cities conference. I wish you all the best for the next days. Have a good evening. Bye.